Hello everyone out there in YouTube land, D here, back with the next part in the series in which I read the story book, Unbirthday. Before that, there's something I want to show off. This t-shirt I'm wearing. I bought this a while ago while I was at a WWE live event. Rather fitting, seeing as how I'm taping this on October 10th, 2025, and I recently finished watching this week's installment of SmackDown. That ending was nuts. Damien getting hit in the face with a fireball like that. Spoilers. Anyway, on to the nitty-gritty. As I said, this is the next chapter in the series, Unbirthday. We left off with Alice helping some of the Wonderland creatures escape execution. She found herself in a maze, but she found a way out, and she's reunited with the Dodo, the Dormouse, and the Hatter. Chapter 8. Alice tried to keep an eye on the trio flying above her, but soon lost them behind the high walls of the maze. She paid little attention to the twists and turns now, ducking in and then out of the cul-de-sacs haphazardly, and not bothering to memorize the changes of direction she made as a result of this. Things crept behind her and pattered away in front of her, and she paid them no mind. All she really did mind was the length and breadth of her skirts, which impeded her speed, and occasionally caught on circular signs that pointed to nowhere. At some point, the maze happily disappeared. The sides of the labyrinth were replaced with thick and wild shrubs that poorly mimicked the boxwood. A spectacled bird, perched with its giant toes wrapped around a low branch, eased from one foot back to another as if guarding, or perhaps merely watching, the imaginary entrance to the labyrinth. "Pardon me, but have you seen the Mad Hatter?" Alice asked it politely. The bird thing looked at her inscrutably, not an iota of kindness, interest, or curiosity in his strange eyes. And this was the most alien thing of all. The last time she had been here, Alice was gently accosted by all sorts of odd, harmless creatures. Curious fauna who wanted to play with her or run away from her, or perhaps loomed menacingly over her to keep her away from their territory. But never had they displayed this frigid disinterest. "I wonder if I'm entering the Tulgey Wood again," Alice said with forced casualness, turning away from the bird and feeling strangely embarrassed, as if she were the cause of some Wonderland faux pas. Tulgey Wood. She remembered it so clearly, the name of the place. But if asked what street she lived back at home, she would have said, Baxter Flashing Hall, and then, no, that's not right at all. It might have indeed had been the forest from a previous visit. The trees were thick trunked with storybook branches, and darkness grew under the leaves like living, breathing entity. Ghostly green moss glowed and flowed around the roots. Little flowers, eyeless, mouthless, poked star-shaped blossoms up from the forest floor. Strange pastel lights flickered on and off at unpredictable distances. It all felt very familiar. And yet, once there were signs everywhere espousing nonsense. This way or that way or over here, nailed several to a tree, roughly carved into pointing shapes. The signs were still there, but in place of the friendly and useless words were bloody hearts painted slapdash upon them. Thick, ugly drips of red ran down their fronts like tears. "All's ways are the Queen's way," Alice repeated to herself with a shudder. She walked into the woods. The first thing she noticed was how silent it was. The beeps, warbles, burbling streams, and quirking duck bulbs were silent. There were, of course, no paths, and she had only a vague idea of which way friends had gone. It was like chasing the white rabbit all over again. "And where is the white rabbit, anyway?" Alice mused. "He wasn't at executions. Usually he's right up front with the Queen and other important people. But of course the Queen wasn't there. So perhaps he's out with her wherever she may be. What did that lizard thing say? That he worked for the white rabbit? What does that even mean?" Suddenly Alice spotted something at the base of one of the gloomy trees. A low flash of unnatural color. She bent down and saw a single marmorath, a bright pink rose, desperately trying to pretend it was a flower. "Excuse me," Alice said gently. "I understand that you may not be able to tell the difference between regular people, especially girls, but I am not at all associated with the Queen of Hearts, and I could really use your help, if you please." The little tufted head lifted up just a smidgen so that the tops of two large and innocent eyes could gauge her trustworthiness. "Really," Alice said as patiently and calm as she could, "you can see there isn't a spot of red on me. I just freed my friends from the executioner, and I'm looking for them. It's the Hatter, the Dodo, and the Dormouse. Although if you knew anyone else who was left, the March Hare, for instance, I would love to see him again, too." The mome Wrath raised itself up all out of the ground on a pair of purpley pink and cautious legs. Keeping both of its large eyes on hers, it tottered, unconvinced, round her feet. Alice stayed perfectly still, resisting the urge to scrunch and unscrunch her toes away from it. Finally, the tiny thing made up its mind and went whirling into the woods. Alice wasn't entirely sure if it had decided to help her or was off on a mission of its own, but she followed it nonetheless. "I thought you fellows always traveled in crowds," she said to make conversation. "When I was here last, I only saw you in packs, or flocks rather, or what do you call dozens of mome-raths? A herd? A murder? A blessing?" The creature stopped long enough to look back at her with sad, baleful eyes. Then it sprawled its legs out and fell to the ground, eyes closed. "Oh, I see. They were stepped on," Alice said softly. "I'm sorry." The mome-rath gave her another look that was impossible to interpret without a mouth or other point of reference. Then it leapt up and toddled on. Alice followed, continuing her conversation, but with herself this time. That way there was no more chance of accidentally saying something hurtful to the other party. 11 years ago, 11 years later, and I'm still mucking things up," she chastised. "I used to laugh at little Alice for telling the Dormouse all about Dinah. What an improper thing to do, bragging to a mouse about a cat. And now here I am in a war-torn land, asking about the Queen of Hearts' latest victims as if they were no more than a background image, a pictorial illustration with no real feelings. Naughty Alice, be more careful. Think before you speak. Remember what happened last time and learn from it." She opened her mouth to say something nice and soothing to the little creature, but the mome-rath was gone. It had just faded out of consciousness as if it had never been there at all. Alice found herself beside a small brook that broke apart and foamed over rocks into a lovely little pool below. But it was all absolutely silent. Impossibly silent. None of that. No, none of that. Nothing is impossible in Wonderland, Alice said with a sigh, dipping her head into the water and whipping around with her fingers. Even that made no noise. Then she heard the faintest bit of something, a song that was started and then suddenly stopped. A chorus? In the middle of the woods? "Oh, that's rather Maud," she said, cocking her head and listening. "Ooh," she said again, realizing what the music reminded her of. "It is Maud. Mad as a hatter." Cautiously, Alice picked her way to the sounds. It was far harder than it should have been. The Wonderlandians' now very recognizable voices grew louder for no good reason, and then suddenly shut off like a door had closed. She had to stop, wait, then turn around and try different directions. She suspected that it was the trees. They scattered sounds they didn't like or didn't want to hear, or perhaps translated into something closer to tree. She rounded up a particularly large oak, and the source finally revealed itself. It nearly broke poor Alice's heart. The escaped prisoners had found the perfect camouflaged hiding spot, a small clearing between trees so large that the branches knotted around each other and overhead. Literally, Alice found herself suspecting that some of the tangled branches didn't actually come from the trees at all and had just grown ex nihilo in place. On the ground were several large flat boulders suitable for sitting. Between them, tufteds of tall grass had been quickly and expertly plaited together to make a kind of flat surface. This swaying and delicate top was set with a number of unlikely objects: a couple of broken teacups, a shell, a flat concave stone, a snuff box. All were filled with water and rested on broad leaves. Two of the old friends slumped tiredly on the big rocks, but the Mad Hatter kept his back straight, shoulders back, elbows close, and pinky out as he picked up the snuff box with one hand and used the other to hold a leaf beneath to catch any spills. Besides his familiar green top hat with the label sticking out, the Hatter now sported a much thinner one over his left eye. Alice gasped when she realized that the doll-sized velvet hat was there to cover up what was probably an empty socket. There were terrible scratches around his lid and cheek. The bags under his right eye had bags. He was gritting his teeth. He also seemed to be taller than last time, almost normal height, and his head of a more conventional size. Normal and conventional being the operative here, and therefore terrifying words. "No, properly now. Let's and," he was saying with a forced smile. The dodo, missing his wig and a number of feathers, picked up his own teacup, the concave rock with his own look on his face. "This is where he would start to sing," the Hatter prompted soft voice. "The March Hare. He would sing, 'Oh, a very merry—'" "'Fraid I don't know the words. But I could learn them if you want, or we could run a race instead," the dodo suggested. "That might cheer us up. A good old-fashioned caucus race." The dormouse lifted his head up out of the snuff box the Hatter was just about to sip from. He, too, looked exhausted, but his eyes were wide and unblinking, and he shivered a little. "Twinkle, twinkle, little bat," he screamed. "If I were a bat, I could fly like that, all away from everything." "Shush!" the Hatter said, snapping the snuff box shut desperately. As water squirted out his sides, he suddenly realized the danger to his friend and snapped it open again. The dormouse popped it back up like a jack-in-the-box, wet but with the same wild look in his eye. "Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear!" Alice cried, stepping forward, unable to watch any longer. She probably should have restrained herself a little. The Hatter leapt up, pulling the snuff box close to his chest and holding his other hand out to— what? Fend off an attack? With nothing? It was a crushingly valiant gesture. The dodo stubbornly turned around and tried to hiss like a lizard or something far more dangerous. And while he wasn't at all a dangerous creature, he did have the mad look of someone, no matter how awkward it seemed, who had definitely had enough. "Alice!" the Hatter cried. And again that change of expression on his face. The softening, the relief, the desperation shot right into Alice's heart. It was the least mad she had ever seen him. "Alice? What's an Alice?" the dodo asked, patting himself down from a pair of glasses on something he obviously no longer had. "Oh, I know you. Did you ever wind up getting yourself dry, my dear?" "Yes, I have." "Yes, thank you, I have," she answered. "I'm so glad you managed to escape." "Yes, we did," the Hatter said, his face falling again. "Yes, we did," he repeated softly. "Please tell me what is happening," she begged. "I received your message, your cry for help. I am here now. What can I do?" "It's monstrous. She's monstrous," the dormouse sighed in his quavering voice, swaying in the snuff box like a cobra entranced by a flute. "A pox on the Queen of Hearts and the caucus bands," the dodo said, trying to pound his fist wing onto the tabletop, which resulted in nothing but the grass bending and being crushed under his force. The shell of water slid precipitously toward the ground. "I'll drink to her removal." He grabbed up his own conclave rock, toasted everyone, and took a sip. "Fine vintage," he observed. "But what exactly is the Queen hoping to accomplish? What is the scope of operations? What is her intention to do?" "Do? Intention?" the Mad Hatter said, suddenly fixing Alice with bright aqua eyes that were clear for just a moment. "What question? Does it matter? She is sweeping her arms across the entire land and burning everything as she goes. She's throwing everyone into prison. She's seizing everyone's property. She's executing anyone who dares ask why or stands up to her. Executes them. Why? I have no idea why. Ask the I no longer have. Ask the friends no longer here. She just wants it. All the cake. Whatever." "Oh, a nice bit of cake would go well with this port," the dodo observed. "It's the tea," the dormouse corrected gently, as if the dodo were mad and to be handled with care. "But do try the chestnut pudding. It's delightful." And with that he hurled a prickly cocklebur at the bird's head. It wasn't even a horse chestnut, much less pudding. The dodo caught it in his rock cup and gulped it down, which of course resulted in a fit of choking and coughing as the locust grabbed the inside of his throat. Alice closed her eyes and counted to 10. They were all mad here. She had to remember that. But mightn't it help if we knew what her eventual goal was? Croquet cards is always all about winning a game. What was she looking to win? The rule of our Wonderland? Alone? Rule? The Hatter scoffed. Rulers for rulers, and protractors, and perhaps slides. Well, one might just as well ask what the use of war is, the dodo said philosophically. There is no purpose. You just pull out your cards over and over again, and whoever has the most at the end wins. There is no purpose, the Hatter repeated darkly. You just put your soldiers over and over again, and whoever has the most bodies at the end wins. Of course, it did make a strange sort of Wonderland sense. In the end, the Queen of Hearts was nothing more than a card grown too big for her britches. Alice used to play war, or battle, all the time when she was little. Mostly against Dinah or her dolls, since grown-ups and Mathilda found the game random, tiresome, pointless, and silly. It made Alice blush to remember how sometimes she used to secretly stack half of the deck with all the royal suits to give herself a leg up against the opponent kitten. Still, it seemed a little strange that the Queen was so energetic and directed in her undefined violence. Something didn't quite fit. So as far as we all know, she's just rampaging until she destroys all of Wonderland? Or until the great clock ticks its last? That the Hatter said with a weary sigh. He scratched distractedly at the tiny velvet top hat over his left eye. Yes, what you've seen in Heartland is just the beginning, the dodo said with a sigh. A view of what's to come. All right, we have a mad Napoleon on our hands, Alice said briskly. I'm not sure what I can do to help. She has an awful lot of soldiers on her side, and as you saw, I can no longer shrink and grow as I used to. You cannot grow because you've decided you have stopped growing, the Hatter said diffidently. You haven't grown in ages, and you've lost the knack. Well, I beg your pardon. In my world, you don't get to decide whether or not to stop growing. My mother's rather short, my father's not overly tall, and I believe I'm about average for an English lady. You believe, Hatter mused. 'Twas the time you used to believe 6 impossible things before breakfast, if I'm not mistaken. Alice started to retort, but then she sat back on her heels and considered. She was the odd man out here, so to speak. These locals knew the realities and rules of their own land. Perhaps she had decided to stop growing. It seemed possible, since she had such a radiant pat answer about her parents. You haven't done much growing up at all, actually, the dodo said, a trifle rudely. Except for your height, I mean. You've stayed the same. In the same house, trying to do the same things you've always done. Excuse me, Alice said, frowning. I have a passion for photography now, and I'm finished with my schooling. If you had contacted me earlier, perhaps you could come sooner and prevent some of this mess. Mess? The Hatter said wearily. I wonder if that's what the Marche would call this. Rest his poor long-eared soul. Oh. Alice crumpled. Everyone was silent. The Dormouse swayed sadly. I am so very, very sorry, she said softly. I don't mean any disrespect to the poor thing. She took a deep breath. But if we all to prevent such horrid occurrences from happening to anyone else, we must strategize, work together, plan. Isn't that why you wanted me here? To help you stop this? Marianne wanted you here, the Hatter said moodily. She was trying to stop it all. She had the odd notion you could help. Marianne thought she could help? Alice tried not to let this thought distract her. But how could this other girl know anything about her? Marianne! The dodo squawked, but not like one would imagine a dodo squawking, or any bird at all. He squawked like an overly dramatic man. Now she's the tardigrades petard. I'm sorry, I have no idea what that means, Alice said, not trusting herself to repeat the same confusing phrase correctly. Tardigrades petard, the echidna's philanthrope. You know. I'm afraid I don't know. I suppose it is a good thing? A good thing? A rare thing indeed, the Hatter snorted. Have you ever seen so tiny a petard that would suit a tardigrade? The dodo's a bit dim at times, but he has her on the knuckles there. Marianne can fix everything up. All right, Alice said uncertainly. It was strange and a trifle naughty, but she couldn't help feeling a bit put out of the constant lauding on Marianne, this other version of her. The first time she had been in Wonderland, with all the growing and shrinking, she had wondered if she was still Alice at all afterward. She even considered the possibility that she had become another girl entirely, including specific girls she knew who had terribly boring lives full of lessons and empty toys. How dreadful that would have been. But here, Marianne was the savior of this fantasy land. Alice, the English girl who had led a comparatively boring, normal life until called for help. Well, that was a turnaround, and a bit painful for her ego. Really, dear girl, she reproved herself, even if this Marianne turns out to be more vexing in person than she is in storage, she is one who seems most able to save everyone. Such a child is not decide and do what is right. Aloud, she said, how did she do it? Contact me, I mean. The Hatter shrugged. She had to wait for your unbirthday. The proper one, I mean. The 11th anniversary of your first visit. I suppose there was nothing else to do in prison but wait and hope and wish. That explains why she appeared the way she did in the photograph, Alice said, remembering the blindfold and the wounds, and shuddered a little. She certainly looked like she was in prison. She traveled to you by photograph? The dodo asked curiously. She appeared in a photograph. Of me. Actually, quite a few of you appeared in the place of the people I knew. I suppose each of you is reflected in the real world, exclusively English world version of yourself. Really? Whatever do you mean? Well, Hatter, in my world you are, well, a hatter. Really? He asked, looking delighted for the first time since he arrived. I'm a hatter in this other land. Ha ha, how exciting. And what kind of hats do I make? All sorts, especially large fancy ones for ladies. Think of it, ladies' hats. He took a dreamy sip from the snuff box, forgetting about the dormouse. The mouse seemed more curious and upset. But Marianne is no longer in prison now, the dodo said. She's free. I rather thought because of what you said that maybe she escaped by photograph. Really? How wonderful, Alice said, clapping her hands. I think the best thing to do then is first to find and join her. The dormouse swayed dreamily. It said that she's hiding out in the back of beyond. I heard she went all the way to To, to Hellenbach, the Hatter added casually, sipping his water as if they were discussing where a friend was spending the summer. I heard she was drumming up a resistance, gathering revolutionaries and medicants, the Dodo said confidently. I heard it was flutes, the Hatter mused. Fluty, wooty, droomy, dummy, dunny, the dormouse whistle sang before slumping to sleep in the water, splashing a little out. Regardless of whether it's drums or flutes, Alice said quickly, before they went off on another Wonderland tangent, could she be someplace called the Grundaround? Everyone looked at her in shock. How did you come to know by this intel? The Hatter asked suspiciously. Nobody knows exactly where she is. The Cheshire Cat told me, Alice said, not seeing any point in hiding the truth. Ah, well, he is nobody, the Dodo conceded, nodding, most of the time, and nowhere at all the rest of the time. What is the Grundaround, anyway? What is the Grundaround, if I may? Alice asked timidly. The Hatter tapped his teacup impatiently. You know, when you're looking for secrets, or whether you're hiding that last lump of sugar, or where the thieves go to sell their stolen tarts, you grunder around looking for the right wrong thing. Of course, Alice said, putting a hand to her head. Grundaround. That makes loads of sense. Anyway, how'd we get there? Generally by walking, the Hatter said with a shrug. I prefer a rocking chair myself, the Dodo mused. Haven't seen a flock of those around since the Red Doom, the Hatter said, shaking his head. I wonder if she's killed them all, or thrown them into her mews. Faster by bottle anyway, since the Sea of Tears, the Dodo said with a significant, accusing look of Alice. All right, can we shrink somehow? To finish her a bottle? Alice asked hastily. She had created the Sea of Tears herself years ago, when as a giant girl she had cried about her situation. It had flooded the place, and made a lot of Wonderland inhabitants grumpy and wet. No, but it's always up to me, isn't it? The Hatter said grumpily. Not allowed to be mad even a quarter of the day now. He leapt up again, patting out his jacket, searching his pockets. It's true, the Dodo whispered to Alice. The poor chap had the nonsense knocked right out of him along with his eye. Hasn't been the same since. Oh, my, Alice whispered back, concerned. That would explain his normal height and head. He was becoming sane. He keeps trying to be mad, I mean. The Dodo went on sadly. It just doesn't come naturally anymore. But the Hatter succeeded this one time at least. He pulled an enormous umbrella out of his waistcoat. With a flourish, he snapped the black and arabesque thing open. A shower of raindrops fell out from underneath until he shook it dry. I don't, Alice began. You never do, sighed the Hatter. And so saying, he tossed it, handle up, into the stream that Alice had dipped her hand in before, and that must have provided the tea for their party. But she was fairly concerned it hadn't been right next to them until just now. Yellow cowslips smiled up from the banks. Literally, of course. Their heads nodded and waved cheerfully, as Alice always imagined the wild happy flowers would. With a courteous bow and another flourish of his hands, the Hatter indicated for Alice to get into the umbrella. Thank you, dear sir, she said with a little bit of courtesy, and, trying not to show any reluctance, stepped in. Whether she finally shrank or the umbrella grew mattered in the end not at all. The getting into it was not carefree and graceful as one might imagine in a fairy tale. It tipped just like it would in the real world, and Alice had a very hard time, swaying and balancing and not upsetting the whole thing. The Dodo had floated in next to her, more like a delicate canary than a large, mostly flightless bird. The Hatter leapt in between them, and the umbrella began to drift downstream. Well, that's the end of Chapter 8, and a rather long chapter. Longer than I thought. Well, I guess that does it for this video. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. And stay big, everyone.